Welcome everyone to our first town hall, and I am excited to share our plans for reopening in person in the fall at Willow. And one thing that's been clear as we've been preparing for the fall is that across all of our stakeholders, what's been most important and what we're most committed to is being able to get back to being in person. And certainly we had some success with our virtual learning and we're able to make that adaptation as it was needed last year, but our program at its essence is built upon being together in person. And so we'll be sharing today both academically and in terms of the safety procedures that we're going to have in place to allow for that to happen and for us to be together in person in the fall. So a little overview of our agenda for this evening. I'm going to go through and talk a little bit about our process and the teams that we're working on developing the protocols and the model that we're going to share today. I'll go through in some detail about our blended learning model. I'll help define that and talk about what aspects of it are unique to Willow. I'll talk a little bit about some of the improvements that we're making both within the classroom and around the campus to support the blended learning model and also support some of the health and safety procedures that we're going to have to implement to be together in person. I will walk us through our current thinking about new health and safety procedures to keep our entire community safe while we are in person. It is important to note that though the enhancements to our campus and our classrooms and the adjustments to implementing a blended learning model are definitively going to happen, and so the first part of this presentation, all of those pieces are in motion and will be in place for the fall. The regulations and recommendations around health and safety procedures are changing on almost a daily basis. We started planning for this back in March when the CDC first released its guidelines. They just released a new set of guidelines a couple of days ago. And so we know that we have some plans in place, but a lot of this health and safety procedures that are going to outline today, we may have to adjust as we get closer to opening in the fall, and also likely have to adjust those as we're seeing implementation and how things are changing at school and in our communities. So I'll spend some time talking about our current thinking around those. I'll do a quick overview on what's next and what you can anticipate in terms of next steps and future communications, and then leave some time for Q&A. We should have about 10 minutes to do that. Lisa, once again, has agreed to be our question facilitator, so thank you to parents who sent questions in advance. As I'm going through the presentation, if you could email Lisa with any questions that you have, she'll be looking at those and sharing those with the team at the end for us to respond to those, keeping in mind that we do have a limited time to go through questions, and any that we're not able to answer during this meeting, we will be following up with responses to those after following the meeting. All right. So as I said, we've been working on these processes since March. One reason that we've been slow in releasing those is that we really wanted to take a collaborative approach to designing both what our educational program was going to look like and also the logistics of what day-to-day was going to look like to keep our faculty and our students safe. And so we really wanted to be inclusive in getting multiple stakeholders' perspectives on what makes the most sense in both those arenas, the educational piece and the safety procedures and health piece. So here you can see a couple of the committees that have been meeting. These have been meeting over the summer. The first is our safety task force, which is really focused on looking at CDC recommendations, New Jersey State and Health Department recommendations in terms of safely reopening schools, and also doing a thorough review of other public and private schools reopening plans. And so that team's really looked at that. We've also got the education task force, which has been meeting, and you can see all the folks that have been sitting on that. And again, these have been weekly meetings. And there we've really been focused on really defining what our blended learning model is and how to implement that effectively. And finally, we have a parent committee that has been looking at some of the plans from both the education and safety task force and their recommendations and giving a parent perspective on the plans for that. One thing that I have uniquely asked that group to do is really think about any community agreements that we need to make to keep our community safe. And so we have our next meeting on Thursday. We are open to having other parents join that. So if you're interested in being part of that committee, please reach out to me or to Lisa to get the invite for that, because we certainly welcome more participation for folks that want to be part of that. But again, I've asked that group to really think about any commitments that we should be making as a community to try and keep our students, our families, and our kids safe. Some of the guiding principles as we've been thinking about our planning are really committing to our core mission of joyful virtues-based learning. So that was central to our both educational program and how we're designing our blended model, but also the safety procedures, and trying to make sure that as much as possible, we can provide a joyful learning experience on campus. Making sure that we are thinking about the health and safety of our students, our family, and faculty members. The educational piece is one aspect of what makes school so important, particularly for younger children, but also fostering a sense of belonging and community is really central to our planning around these different aspects. Ensuring that we're supporting all members of our community, parents, faculty, families, and keeping everybody as safe as possible, and also just checking in on one another and making sure that emotionally everyone's feeling supported and safe and has the resources that they need. And also really important, offering a variety of different options and flexibility. So providing different options for families in terms of how they participate in the Willow program, but also ensuring that we are building a program that will be flexible and nimble. We know that depending on how the infection rates are shaping up in our community, we may have to go through periods of sheltering in place. And so we wanted to really align our blended learning in-person model with the schedule for our virtual learning program to ensure that we can nimbly and quickly make the switch to all virtual learning if there's a need to do that. Now, certainly our hope is that we'll be able to be in person throughout the year, and ensuring that we're practicing all of the safety recommendations and practices that I'll outline here is going to ensure that we can stay in person as long as possible. So just thinking about kind of long-term planning, we know that really there are kind of three phases that schools will be going through. The first one is distance learning. We had obviously the beginnings of the pandemic last year, which led to really strict sheltering in place guidelines and meant that everyone had to be learning fully from home. And so we quickly started to design a full virtual learning program. And since then, and many of you saw that we did make enhancements to it midway through last year, and have been continuing to think about how to really make that a robust program for our students should we have to go back to full distance learning at any point next year or in the future. We're really at the second stage now because in our communities, the numbers of infections have plateaued and at points have decreased. And so we feel like we are poised to be able to be back in person in the fall. Now we know that we're not just going to be able to go back to our traditional program the way it's always been. And that in the fall, we will have to allow for certain families who have unique health risks to be able to be fully virtual so that students can still engage in our program and benefit from all the aspects of it while being at home, that the bulk of our students will be in person, and we really want to seamlessly integrate the students that are participating virtually with those that'll be there in person, and that we'll have to implement different procedures to keep everybody safe while we're at school. And again, we'll go through that toward the end of this presentation. And long-term, our goal is really that we're going to be able to get back to, and whether that's when there's a vaccination in place or we really see that there's lower numbers in terms of infection rates, that ultimately in the future we'll be able to go back to full in-person in the way that our program was traditionally designed, and learning from the best practices that we got from our distance learning, learning from some of the best practices that we got from our blended learning, and incorporating that back into our traditional program. And throughout that, really ensuring that we provide choice for all of our families, that we provide an in-person and a full virtual program for families that need that, and provide flexibility for families to make sure that they have the choice they need to make Willow work for them. So a little bit about our Willow blended learning model, and I do want to give a little bit of context for what blended learning means. Though we are using that title, it's not actually what would be a traditional blended program. So there are different modalities of instruction. What we are most used to and what Willow was founded on was an in-person classroom model where all instruction is happening in person and all students and faculty are attending in person. There are what's called a web enhanced model, where certain aspects of the in-person program are being layered with technology and different tools to help support and supplement the in-person instruction. And so that's layering on technology and different digital resources to support all learning happening in the classroom. So that would be a web enhanced model. a blended or hybrid model, and there are two different types of blended or hybrid model. There's either a blended in-person or a blended web-based model, and really what distinguishes those two is the proportion of instruction that's happening in person versus the amount of instruction that's happening online. So a blended in-person program typically would be about 70% of instruction is happening in person, and 25% online. The reverse would be true for a blended online program, where about 25% of the instruction would happen in person and 75 online. The true definition of that model means that every member of that class is doing a combination of both in-person and blended learning. And then, of course, there is distance learning, where all instruction is happening virtually. And so what we're really looking at implementing, the true term for it is a synchronous distributed model, where at any point you would have students participating in the same program, but some would be in person and some would be participating virtually. For the sake of brevity, we went with a blended learning model, but the true type of program that we'll be implementing is what's called a synchronous distributed model. There were three core tenets that we were really thinking about as we were framing what this model would look like. The first is, again, creating choice and flexibility for families. Also being able to be flexible and nimble. And so, again, trying to bridge the virtual learning program, the in-person program and schedule to allow us to seamlessly switch between those two programs as needed. And really the most important piece was ensuring that we were honoring the mission of the school and the aspects of our program that make Willow unique. And I'll talk a little bit more detail about that now. So really that means that we are continuing our commitment to experiencing the wonder of the natural world through experiential, meaningful outdoor learning, ensuring that we're continuing to provide hands-on and collaborative instruction, and really fostering that joy of learning, continuing our focus on character development and growing our students into leaders who practice virtues, and that virtues program is really integrated into all aspects of our curriculum. Ensuring that we continue to build critical thinking and problem-solving skills by using some of the lenses and models like systems thinking and project-based learning. Ensuring that we foster strong relationships between students and their teachers, and that each student is able to receive individualized, differentiated instruction that's aligned to the way that they learn best. Ensuring that we're building that community. We, for those of you who've been in Willow for some time, you know that one of the things that makes us both unique is the community of students and faculty day to day, but also how integrated all of our parents are. So trying to find as many ways as we can to foster and build that sense of community. And also really thinking about the wellness of our students, focusing on stretching their frames of mind and their thinking versus stressing them out, but also ensuring that we have a balanced approach, and even thinking about that with the amount of technology that we're using and how engaged students would have to be with different technology, whether they're in person or online, and making sure that we have a good balance there. So in terms of our needs and adjustments that we knew we needed to make to move over to this blended learning model, the first I've talked about a little bit is more integration and clear symmetry between our in-person schedule and our virtual learning schedule. And we are kind of in the final stages of our schedule planning, so hope that we'll be able to share that with parents shortly. One thing that you can be certain of is that we will be providing a full day, 5-day program for all students. So we're not going to be doing staggered scheduling. We anticipate that the bulk of our community will be, and our students will be there every day for a full school day. We're going to be layering in new technologies, both different types of resources, but also new hardware to support the integration of the students who will be participating virtually and those that'll be in person. We're really working with our teachers to clearly articulate the learning outcomes for the full year and on a daily and weekly basis, so parents are able to really understand what's being taught and support that learning at home. Ensuring that our teachers teachers are planning collaboratively, and I'm really excited about some of the work that Carol Fontaine is going to be doing with our lower school teachers, really looking at implementing project-based learning and systems thinking and visual arts and design kind of models and thinking into our social studies curriculum, but we'll be doing a lot of that collaborative and integrated planning across the board with faculty. And ensuring that we're providing ample opportunities for small group work and one-to-one time for both students that are there in person and those that are online. So one of the key pieces in order to make the blended learning work is some of the technology enhancements that I'll be talking about. We really want to ensure that technology is supporting our learning and not taking away from our traditional program. And so our goal is to use technology to really leverage and enhance our hands-on experiential project-based learning, both in the classroom and at home. That we're using our technology and specifically our video conferencing software at key times where direct instruction is happening in the class, where students would be working on collaborative projects or group work, to bring those virtual students in and leveraging that video conferencing software to allow that symmetry or that engagement between the students that are there in person and those online. And wanting to, again, mirror the schedule in person and the schedule at home so that students are getting frequent breaks, whether they're in person or at home, and not spending too much time engaged with technology, but really using it intentionally and with purpose. So in terms of some of those enhancements, part of it is increasing the amount of hardware that we have available for students and devices we have available for students. So we will be purchasing Android tablets for all students in kindergarten and first grade. We're also going to be getting Chromebooks for students in second grade. Last year we had Chromebooks assigned to every student 3 through 8. We'll be bringing those all the way down to second grade. And essentially that's going to ensure that our students are consistently using the same devices in school and when they're working from home. We're getting new and improved laptops to ensure that all the devices that our students are using are able to fully use the different software that we'll be implementing. We're getting Bluetooth microphones so that as teachers are teaching, regardless of where they're standing in the room, students that are participating virtually will be able to hear everything that's being said in the classroom. We're also getting additional webcams and video conferencing technology to, again, improve that integration of the students participating virtually and the ones that will be in person. Because we know that our faculty and students will primarily be on campus, but will still need access to technology when they're there. We've beefed up the capacity of our network at school. It's actually 20 times faster than it was last year. So that should really ensure that we don't have any lapses in terms of our connectivity.
They were all home last year. They were in the school.
We've added additional outdoor hotspots so that even when students are learning outside, they'll still have access to the internet and their devices, and that students that are participating virtually can still be integrated with their class. And we'll be doing a lot of training as we gear up for the school year on the different software and devices that our teachers will be using to ensure that they feel comfortable using those once we start the new school year. We're going to continue using Zoom as our primary video conferencing software. Seesaw is going to be used for students in pre-K through first grade, and now students in second through 8th grade will be moving into Google Classroom. That is the current plan. We haven't made a final decision on second grade, but they may be potentially moving into Google Classroom versus Seesaw. One thing that I'm most excited about is really making use of our incredible campus. And unlike other schools, outdoor learning is something that's been central to how we engage with our kids. And so we don't have to encourage our students to do, our teachers to do that. We don't have to encourage our students to go outside and inclement weather. That's always been part of our philosophy of our approach in working with kids. And we have an incredible campus with tons of outdoor space that we are going to be making adjustments to and improving to ensure that at any point teachers have access to outdoor teaching spaces and that we can spend as much time as is feasible outdoors versus teaching inside the classroom. And so we're going to continue our commitment to outdoor experiential learning, which again has always been foundational to Willow's approach. We're going to ensure that all classes have dedicated outdoor space right outside their classroom doors. So almost all of our classrooms have a door that leads directly outdoors. And so outside those doors, there will be space that's dedicated for that class to expand the footprint of their classroom and be able to teach seamlessly outdoors. For classrooms that don't have a direct egress outside, they'll have a dedicated door that only that classroom and that group of students will use throughout the day, and then space to work outside, right outside that door. And all of the classrooms will have an egress. If it's not directly in the classroom, that is very close to the physical classroom. We're also going to be making some changes to the outdoor space. For those of you that know the campus well, between the path that leads from the lower school out the library door to the health wellness building and the inner fields where the kids play soccer, there's been kind of an overgrown space that hasn't really been used. And so we're working with a couple of parents, Glenn Likas and Adam Culkin, along with Jay, our facilities director, to really make that space usable. So we'll be going through and clearing the brush and using that space to create a permanent outdoor classroom, and then 4 to 5 essentially temporary but modular outdoor classrooms that will all be connected to each other, but clearly differentiated, so they're the individual classroom spaces that different cohorts of kids can use that are fully open. What we're looking at is actually using reused sails as covers for that would be tethered to the trees, that will really make those spaces more modular, but again, essentially create an entire outdoor school that our students will be able to be in as needed throughout the day. As we've been looking at our plans for expanding our outdoor teaching spaces, it's become pretty clear that we could have all of our students functionally learning outside for the entire school day if weather were permitting. And again, the technology enhancements will allow for us to be able to do that and still incorporate the students that are learning from home. And as always, we will continue to provide multiple periods throughout the day where students can be outside to play and engage with one another that won't necessarily be instructional or educational time. So that's a quick overview of the blended learning program and enhancements that we plan to make. And all of those things are in process and will be in place for the fall. These next couple of slides are focused on some of the health and safety procedures that we plan to implement. And I do just want to continue to remind our community that these things are continuing to evolve in terms of recommendations from experts. And so this is our current thinking, but know that up until school starts, we will be making adjustments and communicating that out, but potentially making adjustments to these health and safety procedures. And we'll also have to implement these and then go back through and make adjustments as we see functionally how they're working at school. So one thing that we do know, and again, kind of the guiding principle behind some of the procedures that we are implementing, the first is our virtues program, and really thinking about what is the greatest good for our community and sacrifices that we may all need to make to ensure that we're keeping our community safe. Again, focusing on that greater good and what we need to do to protect one another and not just thinking about ourselves and our own individual needs. And our goal really is to at least meet, if not exceed, all of the regulations and requirements from the CDC, from the New Jersey Department of Education and Health Department. So we're doing everything within our power to keep our faculty, our kids, and our families as safe as possible. So what we do know is that to reduce that transmission increases when individuals are in enclosed spaces for an extended period of time. So again, that this framework of extended person-to-person exposure in enclosed spaces, we know that's what leads to increased transmission of different diseases. And so, for example, one of the things that we're looking at is how we can reduce the number of interactions across multiple groups. And one way to do that is to have students essentially staying together in cohorts. How do we reduce the person-to-person exposure? So increasing distance when we're inside, keeping distances of 6 feet or more when we're outside as much as possible, wearing masks, and being really strategic about our classroom design to allow for that social distancing. In terms of exposure, we will be both tracking potential exposure of students and faculty outside of school, and then if there are any infections within school, communicating to parents, anyone that may have been in contact with a student or faculty member that has been diagnosed with COVID, and also really thinking about our enclosed spaces. How do we keep students safe in that, but thinking creatively about how to maximize outdoor learning, because we know that that's going to reduce the risk of transmission. So we have been really lucky that we have a family at Willow that has a company that actually creates safe, green, and really effective products that that we know are effective in sterilizing and sanitizing surfaces and hands as well. So we will be providing those, working with that company that the Higgs family owns, to provide those products at school to clean our surfaces. We're going to increase the frequency of cleaning at school, so the entire school will be cleaned every night, and during the day we're going to increase the cleaning and disinfecting of high touch surfaces, again using these safe but effective products. We're also going to ensure that all of the classrooms are stocked with these products, and it's everything from soap and hand sanitizer, obviously paper towels and tissues, different types of disinfectant cleaner, so that we can really integrate keeping the classroom safe and sanitizing surfaces and materials that are used throughout the school day in the classroom. And part of that is going to be the teachers doing that, but also just building that into the regular rhythm and different duties that the students have on campus. We are working on getting a state-of-the-art hydrogen peroxide air purification system that's been proven to safely sterilize and kill airborne pathogens. And that would be tied to and connected to our already state-of-the-art ventilation system, so that we are in the process of looking for a system that can really filter and clean that air and do so really effectively without any negative health implications. We're also really fortunate that all of the classrooms at our school have windows that open. And so we will be, weather permitting, keeping those windows open both in the classrooms and in the hallways throughout the day, and doing that both in the classroom and in hallways to improve air circulation. So we'll have the forced air that's being purified and cleaned, and then also obviously filtering that natural air in throughout the day through the windows and doors. One of the things that is really important is encouraging faculty and students to stay home if they are feeling ill. So we will be communicating specific symptoms that would be indicative of reasons for students or faculty to stay home, and really encouraging folks to do that by being more flexible in terms of our sick time and PTO policies for teachers, so they feel comfortable being home when they need to, and if they're not feeling well, and also just being more flexible with our grading and attendance policies, so students are able to stay home as well if they're not, if they have any of the symptoms that might be COVID related or any other illnesses that they might be facing. And the beauty of this blended learning model is that even if students are home sick for an extended period of time, they'll still be able to, when they feel up to it, continue with their education through that integration with the students that are there in person. It's one of the big changes from the new CDC guidelines has been related to health screenings of students and faculty, but also the procedures for quarantining students. The initial guidelines had said that any symptoms really should be treated as as potential COVID infections. They have kind of walked back those recommendations and have a more robust list of symptoms that would require quarantining. So we're going to continue to review those with our school nurses, again, looking at what the health department is recommending, what the CDC is recommending, what other schools are implementing, to come up with a final plan around specific symptoms that would require students or faculty to stay home or be sent home and quarantined for a period of time. So those are still being determined, and we'll be sharing those with you before the start of school. Of all of the different components to keeping kids safe, masks have been one of the most divisive. So we know that there are some challenges that come with wearing masks for an extended period of time, both kind of in terms of being able to communicate effectively, but also, at times being burdensome if it's being worn for a long period of time. But conversely, we all know that the best way to mitigate the spread of any contagions is by all community members wearing cloth face coverings when they're indoors. And so you should know that our current plan is for masks to be required when students are indoors, when they're coming to and leaving school, and when they're transitioning between classes at school. Students will be allowed to take their masks off outdoors if they're appropriately social distancing, and we will ensure that there are many breaks throughout the day for students to get out and be able to take their masks off. And there will be exceptions within the classroom in terms of being able to remove the mask. And if those exceptions are being made, we will ensure that there are other procedures in place to keep the students and faculty safe, including having plastic dividers that students will be able to put up at their desks. And the clearest examples of when that might happen are lunch and snack, because we know that students will have to remove their masks to be able to eat. We are considering that likely gaiters are a really good, and there's a picture of that below, a really good way to allow for students to be able to take those masks on and off seamlessly throughout the day. And so we're working on purchasing gaiters for all students to have on during the day. And we're also looking at whether face shields are a viable alternative to masks. And there are, again, some competing thoughts on whether those provide the same level of safety. You should know that all of our teachers and faculty will be wearing masks throughout the day when they are indoors. And if they're not able to effectively social distance outdoors, they'll also be wearing masks at that time. And we finally, our youngest students are where we know that masks are going to be most problematic for them to be able to keep them on during the day. And in all the guidelines and recommendations, every agency has said you have to use masks as much as possible, knowing that that's particularly challenging for the youngest students. And so we are continuing to look at particularly our preschool students to think about what makes most sense developmentally to keep those kids safe, but would be a viable option to do so. And we know that expecting that they'll wear masks the entire time that they're inside could be really challenging. All right, so this is our current thinking. I think you can anticipate that we will be requiring masks when students are indoors. But again, this is one of the pieces that we're going to continue to look at guidelines and recommendations and make the final decision in terms of what's going to keep our community, and again, both students and faculty, as safe as possible. We will be implementing daily health screenings, and so likely what that's going to look like is a form that parents will fill out before dropping their kids off at school. We'll also be taking temperatures of students at drop-off. And so as students are pulling up to school, we will be taking their temperatures before they're able to get out of the car, just to make sure that everyone is healthy when they're getting dropped off. And we'll also ensure that those questionnaires were completed in advance. And depending on how parents respond to those questions, they may have to talk to the nurse before dropping the student off at school to ensure that it's safe for the students to come to school. We are going to be making some adjustments in addition to the temperatures, taking students' temperatures at drop-off, to our drop-off and pickup procedures. So we will be eliminating the early drop-off option. So historically, we've allowed students to be dropped off as early as 7:30, but we're not going to be able to allow that to happen this year because students will be being dismissed. As they get dropped off, they're going to go directly to their classrooms rather than congregating in the library at drop-off. All students will have to be dropped off outdoor with the exception of preschoolers. And so the west end entrance will be reserved for any students that are dropping preschoolers off. But all other students will have to be dropped off and picked up from their cars. We're considering whether there will be some staggered drop-offs So there might be kind of 5-minute windows for different grades to be dropped off. So that is something that we're still exploring. We haven't made a final determination on that. But again, this would all happen within our traditional drop-off window. But we're also creating a number of different places where students would be dropped off. This is still subject to change depending on what classrooms each of the teachers end up in. But essentially what you can imagine is it'll look something like this, where preschoolers will be dropped off at the west end. Kindergarten through 3rd grade would be dropped off at a regular car line drop off in that door outside the lower school. Our middle school students will be dropped off at directly at the middle school building near that door that's by the nurse's office. And then our 4th and 5th graders will be dropped off right at the barn. And it's in that door close to the parking lot by the farmhouse and by the barn. So in order to ensure that kids can be dropped off pretty quickly and we're able to temperature scan all students, we're going to create a lot more drop-off spots. And that's also going to ensure that students are, as much as possible, staying with their cohorts, both at drop-off and pickup. And you should anticipate that dismissal will be the same. They'll be dismissed from those same points. And again, students will not congregate in the library or in the hallway in the health wellness building. They'll report directly to their classrooms. One of the other guidelines that we know is going to try to help mitigate the spread of any contagions is keeping students in cohorts. So students will be staying with their classrooms throughout the day. We're not going to have any mixed grade specials the way that we historically have. And for the most part, with the exception of wellness and occasionally some of our world languages, our specialists will be pushing into the classrooms versus having students transition out to different rooms. We're also going to have our middle school students, rather than rotating to different classrooms, and science is an exception to that because they'll be having double periods there. But the teachers will rotate to each class assigned room rather than having students transitioning between classrooms in the health and wellness building. We have adjusted the middle school schedule to allow for 10-minute breaks between each period so that students have a chance to get outside, to stretch their legs, and to remove their masks as needed between their classes. So we made more of a buffer between classes to allow for that. And we'll also be modifying lunch and recess. So we have various lunch periods and various recess periods to ensure that we're keeping students in cohorts as much as possible. We are really lucky that we are intentionally small by design, and so our classes are our maximum class size is 16, and we have some classes that are as small as 6 and 7, and so our classrooms are well suited to allow for social distancing. So we have gone through and we're ordering additional desks. So classrooms will be outfitted with a desk for every student that will be spaced 6 feet apart and allow for that social distancing when they're in the classrooms. All desks will be provided a foldable plastic barrier, again, for those times where students might be eating in class, and if there are certain activities where the teachers will permit the students to remove their masks. We are essentially dedicating 2 classrooms for each lower school class. The only exception being our 3rd grade class, which is a small class. So we'll have 1 big lower school classroom, but every other class will have 1 primary classroom that will allow for the desk to be social distance, and then an additional classroom that they'll be able to use to break the kids up to do things like group work and projects, and allow them to collaborate while still socially distancing. And again, we're really fortunate that our classrooms are big enough to accommodate spacing the desks out while having all of our students there, and that we have enough indoor classroom space to allocate multiple spaces for each of our larger lower school classes. All of our classrooms are going to become single use and dedicated to individual cohorts, and so there won't be bathrooms won't be used by multiple cohorts of students, and they will be cleaned throughout the day. And in most cases in our lower school, there are bathrooms directly in the classrooms. Where that's not feasible, they'll be assigned one of the hallway bathrooms, again, exclusively for use by that class. In order to reduce the sharing of objects in the classroom, we've increased our supply list so that all students have their own set of classroom supplies, and so that at any point they'll have access to that and not have to share those materials in the class. And if at any point we have to have virtual periods of virtual learning, they'll be able to take all those materials home with them to use them when they're learning virtually. And we're also increasing our supply of classroom materials so that things like manipulatives students will be able to use without having to share them with other students. And anytime that it's not possible to have dedicated materials for students to use, we'll ensure that those are being disinfected before the next set of students uses them. We are contracting with a new company to provide our lunch program for next year. And so they have committed to providing, and a number of us have gotten to taste their food and have been really impressed by the food that they will be providing, both in terms of the quality and taste of the food, but also the quality of the sourcing. So all of the lunches, parents will be able to order in advance from a menu for that week. So students will have some choice in what to order, and then those will be delivered to the classrooms in prepackaged bundles in compostable, reusable containers. So the meals will be delivered in those containers. Those will then be collected at the end of the lunch period and sanitized and reused for the next day for the next round of lunches. And lunch will be in the classrooms. All right. Certainly students that want to bring lunch from home, that will be an option, and we'll continue to remind parents of our allergy policies, so that if any food is being brought from home, there's no risk of making anyone sick that has any specific food-based allergies. And we really do want to encourage all of our families to send reusable silverware and napkins for students to use on a daily basis. We will provide some disposable compostable silverware for students to use as needed, but we really want to reduce the amount of waste that is created. So we'll continue to encourage families to use reusable silverware and napkins as much as possible. And when possible, we'll be able to go and eat outdoors. And again, every classroom is going to have a space adjacent to their indoor space where at any point they'll be able to go out and teach or be able to go outdoors and eat together as a class. We're still committed to having a lot of time for free play outdoors integrated into our daily schedule. So all students will still have 2 recess periods during the day. We are going to be increasing the number of recess periods so that there are fewer numbers of kids during the recess times, and increase the amount of supervision to ensure that they're socially distancing. We want to create different ways for students to be able to play. So as long as students are socially distancing outdoors, they'll be able to remove their masks. If students want to be able to go, for example, into the woods and be able to build forts together and are not going to be able to socially distance, we will ask that they wear masks outside, but that'll give them more flexibility in terms of the activities that they can participate in. But we'll also be facilitating a lot of different games that are naturally allow for social distancing to create opportunities for kids to play with one another and remove their masks while still being able to keep a safe distance from one another. Unfortunately, one of the things that will look a little bit differently are our community gatherings. I know that that's something that's really important to Willow and makes our school so unique is how close-knit our community is and how much time our parents spend on campus. And so unfortunately, we're not going to be able to allow parents to be on campus as much as they have been. And certainly we're not going to allow anyone that's non-essential to come to campus. So we're going to limit any visitors, volunteers, or other external groups from coming to campus throughout the year to limit the potential for exposure. We are going to try and find creative ways to honor and execute our traditions and different community events, and looking for ways to do that either outdoors or virtually so that we can do those things safely. And we'll be working really closely with our faculty and our PA to still try and pull off as many of those traditional gatherings and social events as possible. And then as much as possible, we're going to try and find unique ways to do field trips and to bring our feature or any speakers or guests in, but doing that virtually. Again, because we want to make sure that we're reducing any potential points of spread or contamination. All right. So that's, again, the overview of our current thinking around our different safety procedures. And again, all of those are still being finalized, and we'll be providing bi-weekly updates on those different safety procedures through email updates, and also through a website that'll be linked to our regular Willow website that's going to house all of this information and all of the updates as we're finalizing plans for our reopening. We're going to send out another round of surveys now that we've shared some of the details of reopening, to continue to get feedback from all of our parents, and making another round of phone calls. We're still getting through our first round of phone calls, but we'll be pairing that with another round of calls to really be able to have nuanced conversations with every family about their plans for the fall and any unique circumstances that we should be thinking about for their kids and for their family. And we'll be sending those emails out bi-weekly between now and the start of the school year. Again, our parent task force is going to continue to meet, and if you're interested in being part of that, please shoot me a note and I'll send you the invite for that. And again, one of the key things that I've asked that group to focus on is any agreements that we should be making as a community to try and keep all of our stakeholders safe. And our plan is to have our final reopening plan ready to present to you on August 12th, which will be our next town hall meeting. That again will be on the 12th of August at 5 p.m. And hosted on Zoom, just like today's meeting. All right. So with that, I want to make sure we've got time for questions. So I know that I used up our 45 minutes going through the content, but we will keep the meeting going for at least another 10 minutes to be able to ask some questions. So Lisa, do you have any questions out there that have come through as I've been sharing?
Yeah, I've got a lot of great ones. Thank you so much to everyone who's reached out. And again, if we can't get to all of you, I promise either Francisco or myself will reach out to you. Some of you have very specific grade related questions, so we'll be able to address those privately. So first question, will we be able to decide whether our kids learn in the classroom versus distance learning on an ad hoc basis, i.e. daily, or will we need to decide on an interval basis, monthly, per semester, etc.?
Yeah, so we would love for our families to make a decision about their plan before school starts, just so that our teachers are able to effectively plan for the number of students they can anticipate will be in person and those that will be attending virtually. Now, we know that circumstances may change, so at any point, if parents do need to make a change, we ask that you reach out to Megan and myself to schedule a time to have a conversation about the adjustments that you might need, so that we can allow for either allowing the student to come back in person if that's what makes sense, for the student to switch to all virtual, but we're also willing to consider having students do a blend of virtual and in-person learning. So as your circumstances change, please reach out to us, and we're willing to make an adjustment to what program makes the most sense for you. But we do ask that parents at least make an initial commitment before the start of school so we can plan effectively for that. Now, certainly if a kid becomes ill at any point, they'll be able to join virtually, and parents will have all the information for what that virtual learning schedule looks like, and all the Zoom meetings, so they're able to, at any point, do the virtual learning if anyone becomes ill. But if there is going to be a plan to switch to a different type of program, we ask that we meet in advance of that.
All right, next question. How do you drop off / pick up with multiple grades in a family? Would you like me to answer that, since I'm on the drop off pickup committee?
Sure. Thanks, Lisa.
We're still, finalizing all of the details, but our thought right now is that we would go in a circle around the ring road, dropping off the eldest student first. So for example, if you have a middle schooler and someone in the schoolhouse, you would drop off at the middle school. At that point, everyone in the car would be temperature checked. And the screening questions would happen. You drop off your middle schooler, then continue around, come back in through that second entrance and come to the schoolhouse. So it's going to be a little bit of an adjustment. Drop off is always a learning curve at the beginning of every school year. It'll be a little bit more of a learning curve this year, but I think it'll decrease the bottlenecking and make a very orderly drop off for kids.
Yeah. And we're going to have a lot more folks outside managing pickup and drop off to ensure that we're helping to learn the process well, and that's happening as seamlessly as possible
at each building. Okay, so next question, what can we do as parents to best support our educators and our students?
So there's a number of different things. The first is really having conversations with your kids about why some of these safety procedures are going to be in place. And we really want to reduce any fear, any anxiety that students are doing, and focus on the message that we are putting these procedures in place to allow us to be together in person. And that, our goal really is that these things will be temporary, and as circumstances change, that we'll be able to loosen and relax some of these safety procedures. So that's a really big piece of it, is helping students to understand why these procedures are in place and helping eliminate or reduce any fear or anxiety that they may be facing. In terms of supporting the educators, it's really thinking about how to give as much context to the teachers about your student and what their individual needs are, so they can plan effectively leading into the school year. And I know that our teachers are going to really value that time. So please start to reach out to them and schedule time to meet with them about your individual kids. So arming them with as much information about how they learn best, how they've been feeling over the summer, what their experience was like last year, any considerations we should be making to ensure that they learn effectively and that they're being cared for and nurtured socially and emotionally at school. And then continuing that communication with teachers, both on the academic program and how that's working, but also just how they're feeling, so that we can support them as effectively as possible and really differentiate our approach with each kid.
Thank you. What teachers can we expect to be returning to school in the fall, and to what capacity? If teachers are unable to teach in person, how is Willow handling these subjects?
Yeah, so the majority of our faculty will be in person. A couple of our specials teachers and one of our middle school teachers is planning to be remote. And so what we will be doing for any faculty that do have to be remote next year is ensuring that there are other faculty present to help facilitate and ensure that kids are staying engaged within the classroom while they're receiving that virtual instruction from the teachers and the faculty online. But for the most part, our faculty plan to be in person. So there'll be pretty limited examples of that. And again, they'll be paired with in-person faculty to ensure students are really learning in that environment and are staying engaged throughout the period.
Am I understanding correctly that in the outdoor classrooms, masks will not be required? It was mentioned that we can effectively be outdoors all day, potentially mask-free, and what would the plan be for cold winter weather?
Yeah, so yes, as long as students are staying 6 feet apart, they can take their masks off outside. Now, there may be examples of or times when students have to be closer than that, even outdoors. And so if students need to be closer than 6 feet, we will ask them while they're engaged in that activity to keep the mask, to keep one another safe. But as long as they're staying 6 feet apart and outdoors, they will be able to take their masks off. We are trying to understand what this looks like in inclement weather. And so that's why we keep using the phrase weather permitting. And what we're really looking at is best practices from some of the forest and outdoor schools. There is a long history of schools being taught exclusively outdoors. Many of the examples of these are in Nordic countries, where we all know that the weather can be really intense and really cold. And so seeing what types of structures and processes they kept in place to allow students to be outdoors. So that's one of the pieces that as it gets colder, we're gonna have to work through and put different procedures in place to encourage kids to be outside. We are fortunate that our kids are used to putting on cold weather gear and being outdoors even in inclement weather. And so our students have that context and are not as resistant to it as students might be in other schools. But that's one of the things that once we open and are implementing these procedures, we're going to have to work through and understand.
We had a few questions relating to preschool, and I know we're going to have a deeper conversation about that another time. Can you just remind us when that conversation will happen?
We haven't scheduled a time for that, so more info to come, but we know that preschool in particular is very unique. And so we will be scheduling 2 to 3 different meetings for the preschool parents to have a really specific, and including the faculty in that, to have more nuanced conversations about what this looks like in preschool. So some of these things will be in place, but we know that we have to make different procedures and different considerations for our youngest kids. So we have not scheduled those, but in the next couple of days, we'll send out the meeting invites for those.
Okay, visiting the lunch question, is lunch still included in tuition?
We are looking at implementing a lunch fee for all families. Now that is partially due to this new way that we're going to have to serve lunch, but we also found a really phenomenal food service provider. And so that does come at a higher cost than historically we've paid for lunch. So there's a good chance there will be a lunch fee this year. And that is still to be determined.
Will students be required to wear masks during indoor instructional time, or are desks set up to provide for social distancing?
So the desk will be set up to allow for social distancing. It will be set up in 6-foot increments, and the areas around those desks will be marked off so that students know how to stay 6 feet away from each other. For the most part, those students will be wearing masks in class, even when they're sitting at the desks. There will be a few exceptions to that, and likely that would just be lunch and snack.
Will the advanced purification system, it's the hydrogen peroxide system, apply to the classrooms in the barn, and how many bathrooms are there in the barn?
So the purification system will be in place, would be installed in the health wellness building, the barn, and in the lower school. The only building where we can't use that system is in the farmhouse because it doesn't have a forced air system. But all of the buildings that our students in would have that same purification system. And remind me of the second part of the question. Sorry, Lisa.
How many bathrooms are in the barn?
Bathrooms in the barn. There are enough to dedicate to each classroom that's going to be there. I believe it's a total of 5 bathrooms in the barn. And the only classrooms that we would be looking to have right now would be a total of 3 classes, potentially 3, 4, and 5. And then the world languages potentially would be in that building, and science. But most of the other classes will be in the other buildings where there are dedicated classrooms in each bathroom, dedicated bathrooms in each classroom.
Will specials still be happening? And if so, will they be in the classroom? Will art take place in the art room for all grades, for example, and will they be sanitized between classes?
Yeah, so the only specials that we're looking at having outside the classroom would be science, and that's both for middle school and for lower school students. So the middle school students will have double periods. So with the schedule that we're currently looking at, there's only one day where multiple classes would be using that space, and we'd allow for sanitizing of all the surfaces and materials between those 2 classes. But that's one example of where students would be going to that class. We will still have the science space for the lower school. Marissa is well adept at teaching outdoors, and often she's going to be teaching outdoors as she has historically, but there may be times where they're using that space. So that's one special they would be traveling to. Wellness, they'll be traveling to, since we won't have the lunch program. And since we won't have lunch served in the lunchroom, we're going to dedicate that entire space to wellness. And so we'll be able to have students use one side or another and sanitize the space and equipment between classes. And then world language is another example of where students will be likely traveling. And the reason is 2nd through 8th grade, those classes are run at the same time. So you have part of the kids that go to Spanish, part that go to French. So whichever the larger group is, that teacher, so if it's Spanish, for example, Senora Maria would be going to that classroom to teach those kids, and then the students that have Madame, that smaller group, would be traveling over to the French classroom. And all of those specialist classes will have a dedicated entrance for them that other classes wouldn't be using during the day. Art will likely be in the classroom, and music will likely be in the classroom.
Did I understand correctly that masks will be required even when desks are 6 feet apart?
Yes, indoors for the most part, masks will be required even when desks are 6 feet apart.
Did we the plastic dividers?
Yeah, so if masks are going to be taken off, we would ensure that plastic dividers are being used. And again, really the only consistent times that would happen would be during snack and lunch when kids are eating in the classroom.
One more. I understand that there isn't an existing model for what we're trying to accomplish here, but can you tell us more about who else you're taking the journey with? Who is trying to accomplish the same? How are you sharing resources? And what resources are you drawing from?
Yeah, so we have been really fortunate to be part of the New Jersey Association of Independent Schools. They have done a really phenomenal job of bringing in experts in the field of blended learning and distance learning. And so they've been providing trainings for administrators and faculty on those two different types of models. And again, bringing in experts like One Schoolhouse, like Global Online Academy, that have been teaching either virtually or in a blended model for many years, so that they can impart those best practices and give us the tools that they've been using and the planning and structures that they use to build those models. And then they have been providing a lot of opportunities for teachers and for administrators, and particularly for the heads of schools. We have a weekly call where schools are sharing their reopening plans, both their safety procedures and their learning models. And so it's really been a team effort across all of the independent schools across New Jersey to share best practices. And so the list is exhaustive because really all of the schools, particularly the independent schools, are having to navigate this on their own. And so there's been an incredible commitment to share those tools, the resources amongst the different schools, so that we all can provide the best learning environments and the safest learning environment for all our kids. And what we're really seeing is that most schools are implementing models that are similar to ours. Now, they don't all have the benefit of access to outdoor space, of bathrooms within their classrooms, of smaller class sizes. So there are a lot of ways that we were better suited than other schools to make these adjustments. But really what we're seeing is, because they've shared best practices, because everyone's been so collaborative, a lot of the different aspects of these models are going to be consistent across most independent schools in New Jersey. Well, thank you guys for your questions. I know there was a lot of content that we shared. Please shoot Lisa, Megan, and myself any questions as they come up, and we'll address those really quickly. Know that we're going to continue to meet in these groups and updating these plans, and we really want to make sure that the communication is consistent and that you're seeing those updates regularly. And again, Lisa and I will be continuing our one-to-one calls to have these conversations at depth and at length with each individual family to understand what your unique needs are and take those into account as much as possible in our planning for the fall. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your time and for your continued collaboration and partnership. This is something that we all have to do together. And so it's going to be essential that we work together, that we share our concerns candidly, but also really think about the collective good in determining what school's going to look like in the fall and adjustments that need to be made after we start. So thank you for your time and look forward to continuing the conversation.